One of Australia's leading astronomers is calling for urgent action on sustainability in space. Swinburne University's chief scientist, Virginia Kilborn, is concerned about a sharp increase in the number of satellites being launched into the sky, masking the view of constellations and diminishing the magic of a shooting star. Virginia joins us live now. Virginia, good to see you. Thanks for your time. We know our view of the sky is changing. Just how much harder is it actually becoming to spot the constellations that we all grew up gazing at?
Yeah, so it's a really big problem going forward. And so at the moment, when you go outside, already our constellations and our night sky is masked by the city lights. But if you go out into a dark area outside of the city, what we expect to see is this beautiful night sky with our constellations, the Milky Way going across the sky. And what we're increasingly seeing is artificial satellites that are really travelling across the sky. And we'll all have had that sort of excitement, I guess, and enjoyment of seeing things like the International Space Station and the odd satellite going overhead. However, the future plans for satellites are looking like that we may be losing that beautiful, pristine view that we have.
We're showing our viewers some pretty chaotic pictures on the screen at the moment. Obviously, there are plenty of satellites up in space. Do we know just how many?
Yeah. There's about around 3,000 active satellites at the moment, but there are plans for tens of thousands of satellites to be launched over the next decade or so. And these satellites tend to be smaller satellites. They're cheaper and easier to launch. In some ways, they're really fantastic in that they take less energy to launch. They're using lighter and better materials. So it's actually, it's a little bit more sustainable in that way. But the volume of satellites that is planned to be launched could cause problems for things like for space junk, for even just trying to then work out what the end of their life of those satellites might be. So if we've got, say, 3,000 satellites, that's a bit different to if we've got 100,000 satellites that are actively orbiting Earth.
Yeah, the simulations that we're showing our viewers now are looking also at when those satellites break up or collide. How dangerous is that if we do see a collision of big satellites in particular?
Yeah. So a lot of our space operations on Earth, so the things that we do day to day, driving your car, using banking and so on, rely on space satellites to be able to relay that information. So space is actually really vital for the way that we live and the way that we work on Earth. So the problem with space junk is that if we then have too much space junk up there, and space junk is really just satellites or pieces of satellites or pieces of equipment that is no longer being used in space. If they start to collide, we may see this cascading effect where it could take out some of those vital satellites that we're relying on for our operations on Earth. And so that is a really big worry for space scientists. We can somehow mitigate that. So we're working on things like better regulations. And at Swinburne, we've got a project using AI to try and work out how we can regulate our space constellations in a better way. But when you're putting this amount of material up into space, we really need to look at that holistically and not just from one country's point of view.
So it sounds like we're essentially polluting the sky. In terms of cleaning it up, you mentioned regulation around trying to prevent so many up there in the first place, but can we clean it up? Can we get them back to Earth safely?
Yes, so there's different methodologies for cleaning up space. So some of these low Earth satellites will burn up into the Earth's atmosphere. At the moment, that's absolutely fine and safe, but it's not really a long-term solution. And we don't want to be polluting our atmosphere ongoing with satellites. So there's a number of different projects worldwide that are looking at the issue of space junk, from tracking space junk. For example, there's a project with one of our radio telescopes in Western Australia, which is trying to track space junk using the reflection of FM radio. Really exciting project. So once we know where that space junk is, we can look at how do we mitigate it. And I've seen projects that have been proposed, from harpoons to nets to other things, to try and help remove some of that space junk. But bearing in mind, we've got NASA actively tracking over 27,000 pieces of space junk at the moment, and we think there's more than 1 million pieces of space junk over about a centimetre in size. So there's a lot out there for us to be trying to deal with, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like the horse has certainly bolted on that front, no doubt about it. Virginia Kilborn, really fascinating to speak with you. Thanks for your time.